second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity
Hello and welcome to episode 25 of PvA Radio. I'm one of your hosts, Luke Croft, and joining me, as always, for the second time today, Cody Mellocline, freelance gaming journalist, real news journalist, Cody Mellocline. How are you doing, my friend?
Just disappointed. Just so disappointed.
Also joining us this week, conspiracy theorist, not newfound, because that was during the first recording. Now he's just an established conspiracy theorist, Larry Hunt.
I now know that it's not a conspiracy if it's true.
So if you're not watching live over here on twitch.tv/PVA Radio, like you should be every week here at 9, this is our second time recording this intro because I'm a big dummy who forgot to unmute my two friends here. I'm just glad we got like 2 minutes into the episode before I realized it rather than a solid like 20 to 30 minutes. Of all the things that ever happened in the Player 3 podcast, that was never one of them because we were all in the same room.
Yeah.
So,
There
all
are
right.
weeks I wished I was muted.
Me too. Oh, man. All right. This is PvA Radio. We get together every week. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about them. It's your collaborative audio feature article, your CAFA, if you will. And Larry, what do we do? What tell people to do with that?
Tattoo it to your forehead.
Oh my gosh. The more
So aggressive.
Larry like has the perfect setup to become a conspiracy YouTuber too. With
Here, hold on, I got you.
with his background here. Oh yeah, he's gonna turn his lights off here. Oh, you can also find us on youtube.com. Just search for PvA Radio.
Christ.
It's so terrifying. Like you should start a spooky podcast with that
Yeah,
setup.
he's ready to start a horror stream.
I don't have a spooky voice though.
Just yell a lot.
Yeah.
Boo.
All right, guys. As I said, we're live over here on twitch.tv/PVA Radio every Monday at 9. You can listen to us on podcast services everywhere with our episodes going live every Tuesday. But now that we've got all that out of the way, let's go into what have you been playing. Cody, run us through the rigmarole again here. What have you been playing?
I played Red Dead pretty much the whole weekend. I dove into Overwatch a little bit with you guys, I think, on Friday or Sunday last week. And we got our asses handed to us, so I didn't play it too much the rest of the weekend. But I was basically diving back into Red Dead, exploring that world, hunting some beasts, facing some fish.
Is that like 888 apples and bananas?
It's exactly like that. Just having a grand old time. As I said before, in a conversation no one heard.
Except my part, which is really the only reason people tune in.
Yeah, it's true. I might as well just mute myself now. I'm trying to check some things off the end of my game checklist, and so it's created a little bit more frustration with the game just because it's not meant to be played at that pace. But I'm still enjoying it. I'm actually going to probably do a replay through it and try to be a complete black hat as opposed to the nice guy I was the first time around. Because I know there are multiple endings and I know it affects how people respond to you. So I kind of want to play the way I wouldn't naturally play.
So what you're saying is in your next playthrough, you're going to find a woman who has been tied to the back of a horse, save her, lead her to safety, only to kill her and rob her.
No, I'm gonna tie her, hog tie her, and then throw her to an alligator in the bayou.
Oh, okay. There we go.
That's real cruelty, frontier justice.
Getting very, very dark here. All right. Larry, what have you been playing?
Just Overwatch. I don't know why, but
I don't know if
it's
you
been a
can
rough couple weeks.
I don't know if you can call anything that we did this week playing Overwatch. We turned Overwatch on. We queued into matches on Overwatch. I wouldn't call anything we did playing.
We did a lot of quick play, but it was in the competitive playlist.
Yeah, quick play that cost us SR. It's very... I don't know. Like, I feel like we have this conversation every week, but it's just this love-hate relationship with Overwatch, because when it goes really well, it feels really awesome. And then when it doesn't go well at all, it feels awful. Like, there's no middle ground in that game. And I've been playing a lot more on PC, just solo queuing into games, and which is a whole other bear. But it's just like the level of toxicity people have about, and I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a bit too with some of the topics we have coming forward. But we're moving forward. Like, why people feel the need to just be complete and total assholes in that game is beyond me. So, yeah, I played Overwatch this week as well, and the funny thing is, so Larry, I'm gonna divulge all the secrets here. All right? Is that okay?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. So we have our main account, and we play with like a bunch of friends on our main account, and we try not to be super try hard on that account, just because it's cost us some relationships in the past, we feel like. And so
some of us more than others.
Yeah, so we feel like, so we try to be like, I don't know, human beings on there. Whereas we have these alt accounts, Larry and I do, where we are super try hard on it. Like, we really want to try to get good. That's where we are. We're just tryhards on it, I guess is just the best way to say it. So, anyway, yeah, so playing on
we try not to be jerks as we're tryhards, for the record.
Right, yeah. Because we also recognize that, like, a terrible thing to do on that game is to tilt the people that you're playing with, because then they just start throwing. But for all of that being said, like, we ended both nights that we played on our alt accounts a little bit higher than what we started with. But it still just felt like we were losing the whole night. Just because of the level of the experience we were having and the people that you get paired with. It's just, I feel like this actual stress when you're in queue and you know you're going to get like, 3 or 4 randoms that you're going to be playing with, just because you never know the quality of individuals that you're going to get paired up with. So, I don't know.
And for the last 2 weeks, our DPS players are always 2 people who are paired up in in group chat and not coming into team chat. And so the dudes responsible for doing the damage are just not coordinated with the team. Yeah.
So we get super tilted really quick, and we got tilted on all accounts this week. All right, guys. Again, I'm sure we're going to talk about that more here in just a little bit, but let's go ahead. Let's jump into our topics here. Actually, Cody, I saw that you posted this in required reading for us so just a quick little hitter in the follow-up section.
Yeah.
The new Metroid game is coming. Is it exclusively to the Epic Game Store?
The Metro game?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Did I say Metroid?
Yeah.
My bad. My bad. I'm jumping ahead in the show notes here.
Yeah, Freudian slip. The new, I think it's Metro Exodus is. This is an interesting example because I think Metro Exodus is slated to release in February. It's on that busy release day. And so it's been on the Steam store, and pre-orders have been available for it for a while. And so Steam came out and had I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but they were obviously frustrated, and they're like, this is just like, this happened last second. We were really not prepared for this. So they are working with Epic to allow people to redeem their pre-orders on the Epic Games Store. And all things at the Epic Games exclusivity is timed for about a year or so. So Metro's content will eventually come to Steam as well. But that's just another hit to Steam. And this one stings a lot more because it was on Steam already.
Yeah, this is actually one of the games that blinked. It's releasing February 15th, not the 22nd.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
They moved. They were on the 22nd, but they moved.
That
up
makes
a
it
week.
even worse because it's even closer to release. It's like 2 weeks.
Well, and I think a move like that just shows the level of incentive that
Yeah.
publishers have going to Epic, because I mean, changing your storefront less than a month ahead of your release, like that's a communication nightmare.
Yeah, it's you're incurring the wrath of all the pre-orders, which it's been getting decent press, so I assume the pre-orders are pretty good. But so obviously something that Epic was giving them was incentivizing them to do that despite the consequences, obviously, which says a lot.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, is Metroid coming to the new Epic Game Store?
Somehow I doubt it.
Not this decade.
No, not this decade in the least. Yeah, so my story is pretty big Metroid Prime news. Anybody who's a fan of the series, either the base Metroid games, I know I'm going to be saying Metro the entire time, or the Metroid Prime games, probably heard there was a big announcement at a Nintendo event last year, announcing that Metroid Prime 4 was in development. It was just like a flashy title card, and then it said, just to announce that it's in development. At the time, Nintendo was cagey about who the developer was, although they did confirm it was not Retro Studios, which is the team behind the original Metroid Prime games. There were a few leaks, not leaks, but a few stories ran. I think Eurogamer was one of them that cited they cited anonymous sources that stated that it was Bandai Namco Singapore in partnership with Bandai Namco Japan that were developing it, but I don't think that was ever really confirmed. But regardless, the big news this week is that Metroid Prime 4 development was essentially reset. Like, it was scrapped, and it's being passed now over to Retro Studios, the team behind the original trilogy, with the producer of the original Metroid Prime, Kensuke Tanabe, at the helm. And so that means they were very upfront. It was in kind of like a 3-minute video, where they basically said, don't expect this anytime soon. We're basically restarting from scratch. And I don't think anyone is expecting Metroid Prime 4 anytime soon anyways, but this means that it's just going to take that much longer. And so I want to start off first by talking about the Nintendo's choice to air this in front of everybody. Nintendo is not a company that's known for its transparency. I think that's probably an understatement.
Excuse you, have you not seen that Smash Brothers announcement that's still happening as they explain what every
True.
button in the game does?
That's like, that's not even transparent. It's just like completely see-through.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. So I'm not only was this an unusual example of transparency, it was also an example of the audience like completely being receptive to it. Like, I didn't see much bad. There wasn't a whole lot of criticism from fans. I think a lot of people were happy it was going to Retro. They were sad to see that all the progress was scrapped, but other than that, they were pretty receptive. So why do you think Nintendo decided to take this approach with this particular announcement? Because it is a pretty major announcement. It's something they probably could have kept under wraps for a long time.
Well, I think a part of it is just because despite a lot of people's realization that this game was probably a ways out, regardless of this announcement, that every time that there was a direct announced or, Nintendo was going to do some kind of news dump, people kept speculating that Metroid Prime was going to be a part of those announcements. Mm-hmm. And so I think this kind of gets ahead of it and curbs the conversation so that they're not. I think given enough times, given enough directs where it's like, well, this is the one we're going to hear about Metroid Prime. This is the one, they start to stack up and the frustration in the community would build to the point where like, hey, we don't want to hear anything from you about Animal Crossing or Smash Brothers DLC or anything like that until we get Metroid Prime updates and news. So I think this is just them being like, we gotta bite the bullet on this or hear about it for the next 3-4 years.
Yeah. Before you speak, Larry, I just wanted to butt in and say quickly, the reason that development was scrapped, at least as they cited it, was that the game was not developing according to their standards. So I just wanted to throw that out as the reason for this decision.
Is that
Which-
not always the?
Yeah, but I think Nintendo does have at least for like this tier of their games, they do have a pretty concrete seal of approval and like seal of quality. So I don't know. I just for the record, I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add on that first question. It was obviously necessary to get ahead of things before they turn sour, because they've already announced the game, and there is that problem that so many games suffer from, where you announce too early, and as time goes on and people don't hear things, it starts to get pretty negative.
Yeah, and especially like I'm just generally like I'm a fan of when they at least announce that the game is in development, which is essentially what that first announcement was. They're like, we're working on it. Blizzard probably could have taken a cue from this with their Diablo announcement. I'm curious. Nintendo is not known for learning from other developers. They usually just kind of do their own thing. But do you think that Blizzard's mistakes, plural, and Bethesda's mistakes, plural, with transparency over the past few months have had anything to do with their decision to kind of just come out and talk about this openly with people?
Honestly, don't know. Like, I was real shocked that they made this announcement. It is so shocking to me that I have no idea where this came from.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, just knowing Nintendo, like Nintendo is kind of their own entity. Like they're not super influenced by what other people are doing, and I really just think self-serving is too loaded a word, but like I really just think it was self-preservation that they were like, we got to put this out there. I don't think they're looking at Bethesda or anything like that and saying, let's not do what they did. I mean, subconsciously, I feel like everybody knows in all areas of life, don't be like Bethesda.
Yeah, we all know it. Yeah, I think these problems were probably ever present before all that stuff happened with both Blizzard and Bethesda as well. And this decision was probably made a while ago as well. But I did want to talk about the actual announcement itself, because I think a lot of people, when Metroid Prime was first announced, people had high hopes that Retro's name would be attached to it. People, including myself, love those original 3 Metroid Prime games. They're some of the best. I think they're some of the best Nintendo games out there. And some of the most unique. And so people obviously flipped out when they heard that Retro Studios' name was now attached, despite the fact that it would mean significant delays. But I do want to kind of question why that name, why people's reaction to it, and why Retro's involvement is actually significant. Because it's probably fair to point out that most of the people on Retro's team right now did not work on any of the original 3 games. Obviously, Kensuke Tanabe will be the brain trust and creative force behind this game. He was on the first one, and he's known to be very, I'm trying to think of a way to put this sensitively, strong-willed when it comes to his creative decisions. So Retro's name really is a name only. I mean, there's obviously a clear pedigree of talent there. But why do you think is Retro's involvement actually significant, other than being obviously a nostalgia trigger for a lot of people, and people's allegiance to that studio is very defined? Why do you think their involvement is actually significant, or is it significant at all?
I think there's significance in the fans of the original series are going to see that Retro's involved, and that's going to make them excited, and it may soften the blow of this game being pushed back so significantly. But I think the switch has less to do with moving to Retro and more to do with moving away from Bandai Namco.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Metroid, the Prime games. I've played the platformers from back in the day a little bit, but the Prime games are so good. And just a couple of years ago, I fired up the GameCube, and Luke had never played Metroid Prime, and I put it in, and it holds up really well graphically, gameplay wise. fantastic game, and in a lot of ways, Metroid is it's a level of seriousness that most main Nintendo titles don't bring. And when you look at Bandai Namco's catalog, for the most part, it's more in line with the over the top stuff you would typically expect from Nintendo. Like they've got the Gundam games, they're the ones putting out Jump Force, that kind of stuff, the Dragon Ball games, and I kind of wonder if they just weren't able to bring the subdued, serious side of Metroid. Like that's kind of my suspicion of what's happened here, but at the end of the day, I don't really know.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to get into what you want to talk about next, but reading like fan responses to this news was kind of interesting, like between the Reddit threads and comment sections on the articles and stuff. It's funny, like those are places I generally try to stay out of, but when it comes to Nintendo stuff, I feel like there's always some decent conversation that's happening, and I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed at seeing Retro brought back in on this project because they wanted to see Retro move on to something else, like develop something new. Mm-hmm. However, I think, like like Larry said, I didn't play through the Prime series or anything like that, so I don't have any ties to it. But from what I know of the Prime trilogy, and what I've seen, it's like those games are kind of a relic of how shooters used to be. Like,
well, at least on the GameCube.
Yeah, I just don't know. Like, I know, Cody, you were going to ask what a modern day Metroid would look like, and I think that maybe what happened going into this project was like, it was, hey, we want to create something that's super in line with those old Metroid Prime games, and then seeing it kind of fleshed out and live in action, it was just that, oh, this doesn't work anymore. Like, this kind of super linear approach to these shooters just doesn't work anymore. Like, I can't really think of a modern day example of a game where that looks like old Metroid Prime games, right? And so maybe it was more of giving it back to Retro and saying, like, reimagine this in a modern day. And since it's being done by Retro, like, they have a lot more latitude to take those liberties, where if somebody else were to take that franchise and then take those liberties with that franchise, it would be seen as like a perversion of what the game used to be. So I think that this may not so much tie it back to the Retro legacy of the games that they used to make, but more give them the leeway and the name power behind it to say, like, oh, they can take a step in the right direction and make something that appeals more to modern day conventions than the old series did.
Yeah, I'm sort of reminded. I was thinking of something along the same lines. I started thinking about, like, if another studio had made the most recent God of War, what the response would have been. I think the objective qualities of the game probably would have shined through, but the narrative is completely different. The fact that it's Sony Santa Monica with Cory Barlog taking the reins, reimagining this franchise, like, it's them kind of like bringing their baby maturing their baby and kind of allowing it to grow up. Whereas if it was a studio that had no connection to God of War, I don't know what that narrative would have been completely different. People might have been slighted by the fact that they made so many changes because they don't have a history with it. Kind of like you're saying, like, Retro now has the latitude to kind of toy with it and modernize it in a way that other studios might not. So I do think there is a significance in that their name is attached, both for how that game will turn out and the ongoing narrative behind it. And I guess we should. I'm curious to jump into that question of what a modern day Metroid looks like. A modern day Metroid Prime.
Yeah, hold on. I want to kick it to Larry because his eye was twitching while I was talking.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I just and it's fine for you to say that because you haven't played through them, but I don't know that I would describe Metroid as a linear experience necessarily, especially in the context of where it was back in the day. It was very much about exploring the world and figuring out where you needed to go and it didn't hold your hand or push you in any particular direction, which could be frustrating at times, actually.
Yeah.
But it was very much like the first Metroid Prime was. It just stands out to me. Just exploring this world with all these dead people and trying to figure out what happened here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was going off of stuff I was reading as far as feedback goes. Of like, as the series went on, it got a little more progressively linear. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to color the entire series as being that, because I know like the first one is really praised for its design. So, but as the series went on, it kind of fell into some other
that's fair
different conventions. So, but if that's incorrect, correct me.
I didn't play the third one actually.
I think
never got around to it.
The third one's, I think, is still fairly in line with that, but it is certainly more linear. I do think Metroid, like, more than maybe any other franchise, Metroid's influence is felt across the entire industry. Like, what it did is, there's a reason the term Metroidvania is so prevalent in the industry as it is. Like, that sort of twisting design, like you encounter a door, can't open that door, you need an item to open that door. Like, it's very simple, but that's something that Metroid, if not invented, definitely perfected even in the original games. And that was something that persisted through Metroid Prime. Although I think Metroid Prime, like you said, like, it was working in terms of environmental storytelling and tone, was working in a way that no other Metroid game was, and certainly no other Nintendo game was. So I do think there are things core to that franchise that actually are still very modern, and could be modernized easily. I'm curious to see what an actual first-person shooter on a Nintendo console looks like, because I would actually argue that Metroid Prime's controls don't hold up that well if you're used to playing modern first-person shooters. Mostly just because the GameCube controller is not really meant for that kind of game.
Yeah, the controls do not hold up. But as far like graphically, if you go back and play Metroid Prime, like for something that came out of that era, and the different sort of gameplay was actually one of the things that makes it stand out to me. But bring it into the modern era. Right now we're flooded with so much of the games as services thing, and that's what a lot of people want, especially in the shooter genre right now. And although the environmental storytelling worked really well back then, you're going to have a complete, like a much more engaging story, I think. Like, that's one thing that has to be modernized. Mm-hmm. It can't just be Samus by herself in some ruins somewhere. There's going to have to be a story that makes it a single player experience worth experiencing, unless they go the route of opening it up to games as services. But I have no idea how that would even work.
Yeah. Well, and to me, not being a guy with a ton of experience with the Prime trilogy, I kind of want to expand the question, because, like, what's the last first-person shooter that's come out that, like, man, the story for this game is, like, what it's praised for? Because I think more and more what we're seeing the direction of is both the games as service, but also just, like, Call of Duty scrapping their entire story mode to focus on multiplayer modes. Like, I think we're less at we're less at a time where it's like, what does a modern day Metroid Prime look like, and more like, hey, what does a modern day story driven first person shooter look like? Because if I'm missing something, like, let me know. But I just don't know.
Wolfenstein.
Wolfenstein. And Wolfenstein is a great example because it leans on really great world building, like, and
great characters too.
Yeah, so I think that's a good example. But outside of that, like,
yeah,
there's far more examples of games that are abandoning that than there are of ones that are leaning into it and doing it really well. So I'm curious to see if Nintendo, like, flips the entire convention on its head somehow and delivers something totally different. But I don't know. I don't see what a modern day first person shooter story driven looks like.
Yeah, I don't think they would completely flip the script, just knowing how they've treated their franchises in the past. I am curious because not Retro's game or not the Prime series, but there have been Metroid games that try to tell a more concrete story and end up failing horribly. Like when you try to bring, in my opinion, it's kind of similar to the way Master Chief has been handled. I know Larry differs on this, but I think when you try to bring in a character from a first-person shooter that's largely either silent or that lacks a personality, if you try to wrench them out of the era from which they were created and bring them into this modern era, it's a little difficult. Again, Wolfenstein is kind of the exception to that. So I would be curious how they'd choose to tell their story. I actually would be interested in playing a Metroid game where it is just Samus, but where she actually does talk.
Yeah.
Like that's still one of my major flaws with the Zelda games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Why am I not fucking talking when all this stuff is happening to me? Yeah, so I'm genuinely curious to see how, because I think the actual design of a Metroid Prime could be modernized relatively easily. Not easily, but like you can see where that would work. The narrative structure of it is a little bit more up in the air, and that's what I would be more interested in.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up Zelda as sort of an example of that. In a lot of ways, the basic idea of those two games is sort of similar. It's just how you navigate it. You know, you're slowly acquiring the things you need to move on to the next thing. And I haven't played the most recent Zelda, and I'm blanking on the name.
Breath of the Wild.
Breath of the Wild.
Thank you.
This is from a little game called The Breath of the Wild.
It won a couple of awards a year or two ago. Anyway, how true was it to typical? From what I understand, it was like the older Zelda games, but just much more massive and a little more attention to story. Is that accurate or?
Well, and the whole like open world.
It was much more open.
Yeah.
Okay. So Zelda back in the day felt more open world than the games of its time, and I think that might give us a hint of Metroid felt more open world than the games in its genre at the time. So maybe that's what we can look at. Maybe we're looking at it's going to be it's going to be Metroid just on a much bigger scale. Much more actual freedom will be allotted to you.
I also think that there's going to be a lot more just leaning into really clever level design. And just more emphasis on that. So I'm with you, Cody. I don't think Nintendo is the kind of publisher to really stray too far away from what they've set out in the past. They'll iterate on it to a point where it's like the tradition is still there. We've just, like they did with Zelda, we're just going to blow it up massively and, do something cool with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it lands. I think just to close, like a Metroid that exists in a world where Dark Souls level design already exists really fascinates me. Because I think those two have a lot more in common than people give them credit for. And I'd love to see Retro learn from the like decades worth of gaming that's happened in between the last Prime game they made. So I don't know. It's going to be a while, but I'm at least interested to see what this game ends up looking like. I think we all are to a certain extent.
Oh yeah.
All right. Let's move on to my topic. Talking about EA for the second week in a row, but in a totally different manner this week. So Anthem is coming out end of February. Guys, it's almost February. How crazy is that?
That's nuts.
They had a demo that they released last week.
Call it by its correct name.
I'm sorry.
VIP demo.
VIP demo, yes. yes. Those who pre-ordered the game, correct, were able to access this demo. Mm-hmm. And they were given a certain number of codes. And from what I understand, you had to... Saltiest Chuck is in the chat with us here.
Hi, Salty.
Anyway, so when players tried to access this demo, quote unquote, and we'll keep calling it the demo because number one is what they called it. Number two, it matters to what I want to talk about here. Servers ran into huge issues, players were not able to connect. But not only was this impacting Anthem, it was also impacting other EA properties. So people were having trouble accessing the FIFA servers, the Battlefield 5 servers, the Star Wars Battlefront 2 servers, and community manager Jesse Anderson said on Twitter, quote, "Servers are getting slammed. The team is working as we speak," end quote. And then shortly after, EA said that they deployed more server capacity and that the network stuff was going to be able to ease. Was going to ease up. So my question, I guess first and foremost, is when are companies going to learn? Like when they create these things, number one, they have to dedicate as many resources as humanly possible to being able to handle it, and number two, to be able to communicate properly like what these tests are. Because I feel like after a weekend like that, Anthem has kind of an uphill battle to climb because they're always going to be painted in this corner of like, oh man, the servers were having issues during this demo. So I guess my question is like, how can companies handle these things better?
So, in an odd twist, I know I'm not allowed to talk about it anymore, but I'm going to break the rules. For the second week in a row, I'm going to say something positive about Fallout 76. The way they handled their beta, it was such a fun and creative way to really communicate what was actually happening. The break everything test application. Just communicating up front. The point of this thing is to see what's not going to work right, break it, so we know how to fix it. Now, you got to follow through with the fix it part, but on the front end, like, hey, that's how you got to communicate it. And who was it that called it a technical stress test? Or it was some big... There was another company that did that. It comes down to what you call it. And too many times people are going and expecting that they're just going to get a good taste of the game, and you'll get a taste of it, but you also have to go in with the expectation. Yeah, you also have to go in with the expectation that it might not actually work very well for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me this was less of an issue, although I will admit that the part where players couldn't access other EA games was definitely something new.
Yeah.
Server issues and networking issues are hardly new. And that part I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about network infrastructure, and watching developers talk about it on Twitter was fascinating because it's obviously a much more complicated than I ever hoped to understand. And there are many reasons why it doesn't work. Ultimately, I don't think any developer will be ready when their game, the network goes live and it's actually interacting with other people's networks for the first time. Problems are going to come out of that regardless of how prepared you are. But I do think the latter part of your question, Luke, is where I'm most interested, which is how developers label this, and probably more importantly, when they choose to do these things. Because as it stands, Anthem, like pretty much every EA game, has a weird staggered launch. Really, has a weird staggered release. So people will actually get their hands on it February 15th, which is 2 weeks away from now, which is really not that far away in the grand scheme of things. So I think labeling it a VIP demo is dumb.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably pretty reductive, but it is a mistake on a number of levels. It's splintering your player base. It's making it sound like this is a fully packaged, ready to go demo of a game that couldn't possibly be that under any circumstances. This is a beta. I mean, it's not maybe beta. I think break everything test. What's the A stand for?
Application.
Application is. I love that terminology because it is a beta is players are meant to get in there and break it, and then they respond to that and figure out how to get better from there. And ideally, you don't do that 2 weeks out from when your game releases. Yeah, I think the way they've labeled this and the way they've decided to communicate what it is to their audience was mishandled, which is disappointing because I really want to give BioWare a shot on this, and I'm still interested to get in and try it out this upcoming weekend. But I'm not confident that I will actually be able to based off the results of this past weekend.
Yeah, it's difficult because it's just like it's becoming a theme, right? On this show where I sit back and ponder, like, where's the person in these meetings who pumps the brakes on some of these decisions and is like, do we not have enough historical lessons from other companies doing these things to where
In our own company.
in our own company where we can approach these things and characterize them in a less of a marketing way and more of a realistic way of just like, look, people love betas. They love early access. They love getting in there. They love finding bugs and reporting bugs. And so I'm with you, Larry, as much as I'm disappointed I have to punish you for bringing up Fallout again.
I understand.
Fallout did it right. Like, hey, yeah, we want you to get in. We want you to try out the game and see what it's all about. But at the end of the day, this is a self-serving opening up of the servers to see if we can handle the capacity and make sure that all of our internal systems are working the way that they need to be working. And people respond fine to that. Like, and especially people who buy into the game early because they would rather the game be broken for the beta than for it to be broken at its launch. And so, but when you characterize this as this like VIP demo, this is the big thing. Come on, everybody get in. And everybody's like on social media asking for codes, and there's people giving away codes on Twitch and stuff for it. Like, you generate a level of hype around the game that when it ultimately ends up broken is going to harm the game. And I think of like the Division was like this when it came out, when its beta launched, and it did a little bit better job kind of expressing what the beta was. But that was at a time, I think, kind of a little earlier on where people still had that expectation that a beta was kind of a demo, you know? Because, like, I remember the original Destiny's beta, and it, like, went off without a hitch pretty much. It was, like, super smooth, and that was what people just expected. Like, oh, it's only a couple weeks out from launch. When it comes out, it's going to be representative of the final product. And it's like, that's not what this is. And so I just think, like, there's a lot of people with reservations about Anthem already. I don't feel like it's generated quite the amount of buzz that it did when it first got launched. I think their kind of like guardedness with information about the game over the last year and a half has been a disservice to them. And so the last thing they could afford was to have a beta like this or a VIP demo where, hey, this is how our very important people are completely locked out. But yeah, I'm with you too, Cody. Like, I can honestly say I can't think of another time where a demo impacted publishers' other properties. Like,
Yeah, that's so bizarre.
that's new.
and this is the thing that doesn't make sense, right? So, and look, I'm not a computer scientist or anything like that. All right?
None of us are.
If you could see him setting up this stream every week before we started, you'd know that.
Exactly. Or if you could see me starting the podcast and realizing that I've only unmuted one person's mic and we've gotten 10 minutes in and have to restart.
Not that I could do better.
My point being, like, there's a finite number of codes that exist, right? They know that this many people pre-ordered, they get this many codes, we can multiply that out, and we can kind of extrapolate out from there because we know what launch day numbers look like the number of pre-orders that happen. This is the percentage of people that are going to get on. There's some math that can be done, right? Some data analysis by people that are smarter than me to know, like, these are the resources we're going to need in order to handle the just onslaught of users trying to log onto our servers at any given time. Why is that infrastructure not in place when they flip the switch to push this thing to go live? I'm kind of legitimately asking that. Like, I would love some clarity around what that process looks like, because if it was just a matter of deploying more resources, more servers, like, they should be able to know that up front. because each of there's probably a finite amount of traffic that these things can handle at any given time. But like, it also makes you wonder, how the fuck does EA's infrastructure work? That it's like FIFA's servers are dependent on how Anthems are performing.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm more curious about, because I think the internet is just a fucking mess of wires. Like, it's an outdated piece of garbage, and I think developers trying to work with it is difficult, especially when, like, for the first time, suddenly your servers are interacting with other people's networks, and those networks might not be the best. They might have issues as well. I am sympathetic to developers on that side. What I'm not sympathetic to is a particular publisher's inability to even have its other games work well during that period. That is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
And to your, I don't want to light over that if you have something to say, Larry, but just quickly to your point about the idea of a VIP demo, this is meant to be where you show off your game at its best and have those people then go out and evangelize it.
Mm-hmm.
This is when a lot of influencers are playing it. This is when a lot of press is playing it. And also the people who have subscribed to your service, and to not do right by those people and to have it suffer this bad of a connectivity, just have this amount of issues is not something that you ever want, and it's definitely not helping people, including myself, who are skeptical of the base idea of Anthem and how it will work. So I just wanted to quickly say that before we go anywhere else.
And as a consumer, although I'm sympathetic to server issues, and at this point, I just expect them at this point when people have betas.
Or launch a full product.
Yes, well, that's what I'm getting at. Although I'm sympathetic to that, as a consumer, when I see this happen at beta, automatically this game goes on the list of, I'm not picking that up at launch. I'll wait till they get everything ironed out. Like, I have no confidence that this will be any better at launch. Whether that's fair or not, that's where this kind of thing puts me.
And we'll see if it fares any better this weekend for the actual open beta when there are even more people playing it.
Yeah, and for clarity's sake, I think the reason it was impacting across different games is because I think it was impacting the Origin login. You know how like Ubisoft has their universal login for their stuff. EA has the same thing, so I think it may have been impacting that. But still, it's just like how you haven't set up some kind of like oh man. So Salty as Chuck in the chat here.
You trapped him.
You trapped him.
Yeah, hold on. I don't know how to give him permission, so I'll wait till I'm done with my point to give him permission. But Salty as Chuck's here in the chat, and he asked us about something. I said, hey, can you find me a link? And he dropped it in the chat, and Moobot just destroyed everything he's ever said on Twitch ever.
Also, Moobot thinks that Cody's topic is the Assassin's Creed DLC controversy.
It's going crazy. So I'll
Moobot is off the rails.
All right, I modded Salty as Chuck so he can share links. Salty as Chuck is an old friend of the Player 3 podcast, so and the power goes straight to his head. So
you're all getting banned. I'm banned already.
He said he'll ban Moobot. Anyway, I'm with you, Larry. There's a level of distrust that I hold over a product that can't get its shit right in the beginning, and well, that's unfair. I think if these were just like minor issues, minor hiccups, hey, you know, some people are experiencing some difficulty getting in, like, you expect that level, right? You don't expect fucking cataclysmic, you can't log on to Madden NFL 1998 now because this game crashed our servers. Like,
Luke, I don't think this is what kept you from logging into Madden 1998.
It's the fact that my computer won't accept a Sega Genesis cartridge.
I think you're just shoving Ethernet cables into the back of your console.
From what Cody just told me about the internet, all I need is a ball of wires and I can connect to online.
It's a series of tubes. Listen.
Cody's like, I poop into the internet every day.
Isn't that how you start it?
All right, this conversation is devolving.
We've derailed it.
But we're leading into a point here. So Larry, you've expressed that like the performance of a beta can get you to decide on a game or not. Are there any like real world cases where you played a beta for something, and either its performance or just the beta in general, something within its structure changed your opinion of whether or not you were going to pick up a game?
So it can change my opinion in terms of whether I'm picking up day one or not. I don't know that I've ever like had a beta keep me from buying the game altogether directly, but sometimes that delay from buying it day one snowballs into I just never get around to picking it up. And the one that comes to mind the most is, I forget which battlefield it was, but there was one where in the beta, like people were just constantly falling through the map.
All of them.
And that may explain why I've never purchased a Battlefield game.
Yeah, that was probably 3.
Yeah. But that's really the clearest example for me.
All right, Cody.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't think it's ever stopped me from buying a game. It's definitely given me pause. Destiny, I mean, I bought Destiny. Destiny's beta is pretty good. The thing is, like, if it's labeled a beta, then I know what to expect, that it's going to be busted in some way. I also generally don't buy games like this day one as well, just to see how it shakes out, unless it's Battlefield. Battlefield day one is usually pretty good. I think I held off on playing The Division because of its beta, though. And that was both the game itself, like the actual structure and design of the game, and the beta, which I felt didn't really... It had a number of issues that I wasn't confident Ubisoft specifically could address.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the most significant example that I can think of.
Yeah, there were two for me. One was For Honor, and it was just because I thought I would like For Honor, and I didn't end up liking it. It had nothing to do with the performance. It was just like it really served as a demo for me to realize that I didn't like the gameplay. Also, Prevail Oak and 2 Cozy. Welcome to the stream. And then the second one being Rainbow Six Siege, because the beta was just completely and utterly broken on launch. And
I keep trying to remember playing the beta, and I think the reason I
didn't
is because all I did was get into the menus.
Exactly. We didn't. We didn't. We got into the connect to server screen, tried to, and it didn't let us. And in fact, I think that's how it was when the game launched too. Didn't the game launch in a broken state too? So, in Rainbow Six Siege, I mean, look at my obsession with Overwatch. I love team-based shooters. Like, Rainbow Six Siege's window to capture me was small, but it was real. Like, and I'm sure if I went back and played it now, I'd love it. But
You would.
Number one, I can't afford to get addicted to another game.
Yeah.
And number two, I get really sour taste in my mouth from how companies handle the beginning. You know, there's so many games that I've ditched because like Fallout 76 being one of them. I can't. Anyway, I want to bring up this tweet that Salty as Chuck sent us once, and Moobot just lost its shit. So this is from Mark Dara, who is the executive producer for Anthem. He says, "So how's the Anthem demo different from the game?" And he lists off stuff. "We start you in the middle. No tutorials. No pilot picker. Balance is super different. Economy is completely different. 6 weeks less bug fixes. With only one story arc, I think the mission Stronghold free play balance will be off a bit. Slightly less nuanced PC controls. We've renamed a few things for clarity's sake." And then at Trisha_23A says, "Can't log in."
That is an issue.
Yeah. My point being here, if that doesn't show you that this had nothing to do with demonstrating the gameplay of Anthem and more to do with handling the server's capacity, then I don't know what will. Like, this is hedging to an extreme level. That, like, hey, and this was January 19th, which was 9 days ago. right? This was before the demo even released. So hedging early on to just say like, hey, don't expect too much when we come out. It's going to have all these things, and then it launches and people can't even log into it. So I don't know. Like it's a double-edged sword, especially. Rainbow Six Siege is one thing. Like Rainbow Six is an established franchise. Siege was something totally different, but you still have a lot of equity in that brand. Whereas Anthem is like, look, this is your first impression of this game, and for you to not have it right to the point where you're a week out from the launch of this thing and you're having a hedge, like, I don't know, man. Like, I think it'd be better just to not do it.
Or do it farther in advance.
Yeah.
Which is probably what they should have done.
And so, I mean, to his credit, Mark Dara was pretty straightforward about what to expect. But whoever's responsible for calling it the VIP experience or whatever, not so much.
That sounds like an EA move.
Yeah, I was going to say that is probably the difference between. I'm sure that BioWare was like, hey, we just want to call this thing a beta.
Yeah.
EA was like, no, we got to call it the Super Wolf Blood Moon.
And then they bargained them down to VIP.
Yeah. So.
Super Blood Wolf Moon Total Eclipse of the Heart.
All right, guys. Let's move on. Oh, well, hold on. Salty's Chuck says, I feel like that's probably handled by the PR for Origin's launcher than Anthem or EA, honestly. Well, EA and Origin are like one and the same, so...
There's probably a separate Origins team, though.
Yeah, but I imagine EA has... The marketing buck stops with EA.
Yeah.
And that's a marketing move right there, so... all right, Larry, what is your topic?
So, I read an article this week that I really loved, and I would encourage everyone to go check it out. It's on Kotaku, and it is called Overwatch is No Longer My Third Place by Cecilia D'Anastasio. And I'm just going to read you the first two paragraphs of that to kick us off. Nobody ever asks why anyone stopped playing Halo 2. No response would merit it. The game came out in 2004, and 3 years later there was Halo 3. At some point, it got old. Another game came along. Friends moved on. It was just the thing you did, and then you went and did something else. Everybody's been asking me why they don't see me on Overwatch anymore. It used to be that most weeknights between the hours of 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. a green dot would accompany my Battle.net gamer tag. It had been like that for years. Overwatch was a place where friends could find me, like the neighborhood coffee shop in Friends or the corner pub. When I stopped showing up, I got questions. And she goes on to just really elaborate on how video games have gotten to this place where they are the third place. The place that's not home, not work, but another place where you encounter other people. And it's very focused on Overwatch in particular, but I thought it was a great examination of a role that games have come to fill in our society, that they just kind of ease their way into that in such a way that I didn't notice it was happening till it happened. And in many ways, as long as gaming has been a thing, it's been this third place. At least as long as online gaming has been a thing, it's been this third place, this place where you can spend time with other people. But it's obvious that it's hit a whole new level now, right? So the first question I want to tackle here is, have you ever created or maintained friendships through gaming? Have you had a game that was like a place where you met people and you met them regularly and you knew you were going to find them and hang out with them?
I want that really bad. Like, honestly, I've maintained relationships through gaming. You know, I've had gaming be my one point of contact with a friend I established sometime in real life. But I've never like met somebody online and then that person just like, I played Halo with this guy for years and he was a part of my wedding. You know, like I don't have those stories. And, one of the big reasons that I wanted to get into PC gaming and into PC Overwatch is because there are so many like awesome Discords and large communities of people who play Overwatch, but it's pretty exclusive to the PC scene. I'm sure there's Xbox and PS4 communities out there as well, but there's like streamers and people that I watch who have these communities who run game nights that I want to be a part of. And in the hopes of finding some of that. Not necessarily like I need a best friend that I play with all the time, but like just people I can connect with. But then I also understand something about me, and that is that I am not generally a person who connects really easily with people. And so gaming is just, it's difficult, like, because you get in and I'm kind of focused on like, we're playing Overwatch. I want to win. I'm kind of a try hard. Like, it's hard to, and Overwatch itself is just a hard place to create relationships because it's so tense. And so my short answer to my long response is, I wish.
Yeah. Halo 3 was a game for me that was kind of like that. I still have, I mean, I don't play with them any longer and I kind of regret it, but I have people in my friends list kind of like they're just ghosts, kind of like I knew them and I played with them all the time, never met them in real life, but would play with them on a nightly basis. And Halo 3 was that game for me for a very long time. But for the most part, it's in kind of what you were saying, Luke. It's much more of a way for me to maintain relationships I already have outside the game. And I don't, especially now when like texting and just any way you can imagine to communicate with someone on your computer is possible. Like there are so many points of contact where the game is not the primary point of contact for me with anyone anymore. So I don't know. I think I consider a third place for me a lot of single player games that I just end up living in. But I think that's different than what Cecilia is talking about. But I do think it can be just as powerful. So I too sort of wish for a third place, and I've had it at certain points in my life. But I think gaming has changed in a way that, like her, I can no longer exist. I'd no longer have a third place in any game, really. Unless it's maybe The Witcher or Red Dead.
Yeah. So for me, I've actually had a couple of friendships that started because of playing together online. But much more for me, it has been a way where I kept in touch with friends that we lived together in an area for a while and then parted ways. So I played with the same handful of guys from high school in Halo all the way up through Halo 5, really. And then we jumped over the Destiny, and then we began to diverge in our gaming interests. And me and one guy from college were the only ones that jumped on the Overwatch train. So the group kind of fell apart. But for 6 to 8 years, there was a group of guys I was playing games with almost nightly. And it really was this get on, hang out. And if someone wasn't showing up, you'd like call and check on them, see what's going on. So I have had that experience quite a bit. Okay, so that answers it for me.
Well,
and she.
Oh, go ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
I'm about to transition to the next thing. So if you want to weigh in more on that, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, like, I guess the closest thing I have to that, honestly, is Cody as a friend. Like, I haven't, we didn't meet through a particular game, but we met through writing about games and him coming on when we were doing Two Left Sticks. And, like, we've maintained that relationship beyond Two Left Sticks. We play games together. We do this podcast. Like, I've never met Cody in real life. We're hoping to change that soon. But even though, like, there's no particular game, I think gaming has been a third place for me. This podcast and, like, the projects that have come out of my love for gaming are a third place.
I think that's different than what Cecilia's talking about, because that's more like that's a passion and hobbies of any kind to bring people together.
Mm-hmm.
This, and I agree. Like, we've maintained our relationship through gaming adjacent things like Slack and Discord and gaming things, period, like Overwatch, despite the fact that it's more a relationship destroyer than a relationship creator or foster. But I think, like, the concept of a third place is so intriguing to me. And I think we'll talk about this as we go down, so I don't want to trample too much on it. But the concept of a game specific game as a third place where you exist and live, and one that can easily move past you, is, I think, very meaningful, and something that is outside of gaming as well, but certainly is unique to gaming as a medium.
Yeah. And I've seen lots of Reddit threads. I love Reddit threads that deal with the topic, where people talk about the gamer tag ghosts. So this person, we played together all the time, they just disappeared. Like, some crazy stories come out of that. Like, one guy, he talked about playing with someone, I forget what country he lived in. It was one of the Arab Spring countries, though. And this guy, they played together for years, and he sent him a message, things are getting scary, don't know when I'll be on again. The guy never showed up again. Like, there are all these like crazy, you jump in those threads and it gets surprisingly emotional for people that never physically met. And it's just a testament to how real relationships can be cultivated in spaces that are not in many ways real.
Well, I'm not I have very few people that I've just like added out of the blue, like from playing. But I'll be over at Larry's house and he'll be on his Xbox and it'll be like, so-and-so's online. I'm like, who's that? And he's like, I think I played Halo 3 with him back in the day. And I'm like,
I have so many friends like that.
yeah, I don't connect with that at all.
There's some vague ones, but there's some, if they were to jump on, because they were to be like, oh, this is so-and-so, they pulled off this crazy play this one time, and that's why they're on my friends list. But yeah, she goes on to talk about how these in recent years these games have gotten to a place where they it's become more realistic as far as the third place goes. So what changes in online gaming have taken place that make it more like a real life third place? Whereas before you were kind of just hanging out in nondescript lobbies. What's different now? It seems like people are engaging this more. Does that make sense? You both look confused.
No, I get it. I think part of it is, so her referencing moving from Halo 2 to Halo 3 is, I think, the key to this, at least for me. The player base just migrated, and then you could pick up, that a new Halo game would come out in a few years. But it wasn't a live service game like we have now, where it is a thing that evolves and changes over time and exists for a very long time, like a real place. I think that's, for me, the biggest difference, and the way that these online third places are becoming more like real places, in that they exist. They just exist. People don't really move on. And the place adapts and changes based on how people interact with it, how the developer then responds to how people interact with it. And it's a dynamic living organism. And that's just very different than either Halo 2 or Halo 3, other than when they released DLC and you had to get used to that. So it's very, for me, like, I haven't played Siege in a long time, and even probably a few months, but even for me, that's a long time to be away from a game that is constantly changing, and for a game to be able to move past me, it's just, we're two ships passing in the night. It's kind of, that's very much like a real place, to not really recognize it when you come back to it after being away for a few months.
Yeah.
I think another thing is just that the communities exist outside of the game, and so you have these ways of just constantly being connected to it, even if you aren't in front of your screen playing it, And as a guy who is like, Overwatch is my third place now. Like, I calculated it. I have over 600 hours across all my accounts in Overwatch now, and when I'm not playing Overwatch, I have the ability to read about Overwatch, or follow people on Twitter who are talking about Overwatch, or engage with people on Reddit who are theory crafting about Overwatch, or watch people playing Overwatch on Twitch and interacting with streamers, or watching Overwatch League. Like, there are all these tendrils that go out from the game itself to where it becomes a community at large that I can be a part of. And so I think, like, it's a lot easier to entrench yourself in something when you can get your fix on it in a million different ways, And
yeah, there's so many points of access,
and you start to develop like inside jokes and like the meme culture of the of those communities and stuff like that. Like you do begin to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. So I think that just games do a much better job now of, and there's just a lot more technology around building communities in games that keeps people coming back. And like people don't define themselves as much as like I play on this platform or I play on that platform. A lot of people now define themselves as this is the game that I play. You know, Salty as Chuck says, I feel like MMOs like EQ and WoW were and are the de facto. I just play because friends I've met, and it's literal chat room for those friends with little contact outside the game. And like those are games where when you think about it, like nobody's like, yeah, I casually play WoW and I play this and I play that and I play this. Like, no, I'm a WoW player. I am an Overwatch player. I am a Fortnite player. Like people entrench themselves in these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
WoW is such a good example too. All my friends from back home play it.
Live it.
And they're except for me. And they've been part of a guild since middle school. And like WoW is very much to me a strong example of a company building networking infrastructure into its networking infrastructure in a different way than internet networking. But like ways for people to network and create communities, they built it into the game. And those relationships last a long time and can get very intense based on my friends' stories. I think WoW is the granddaddy of that stuff. I love hearing stories of people who have gotten married through WoW or through Second Life or games like that. Those are like incredible third or even first places for some people.
WoW is definitely the turning point for this, I would argue, where games went from kind of a third place to absolutely a third place. There were people who lost themselves in that game. Luke and I went to college with plenty of people who failed college because they couldn't leave the fake game world of WoW. And Cecilia touched on it in her article. But the big thing that made the transition was it began to look more like real life. You had actual locations. You were a real character standing in a real room rather than just text on a screen. Fashion became a thing. You've got shops. There's commerce in the games, that kind of thing. In many ways, they're real places now. Well, I was preaching once in my church, and I referenced a conflict that had happened between friends in a video game, and I made this like offhand comment about older people maybe not getting what I was talking about, and then used another example. But after church, one of the students, I'm a youth minister, one of my teenagers' moms came up to me and was like, I totally got it. And she like went on and on for like 20 minutes telling me about her WoW guild that she and her husband were a part of. And her husband, like he had made friend, he was in the army, I believe, and he made friends in service. And when they came back from overseas, that's how they stayed in contact. They joined a WoW guild, and it really helped them not fall into a lot of loneliness that people that go through that path in life tend to fall into. So it was a pretty cool story. So there are good things and there are bad things, I think, about games as a third place. What do you think are the pros and cons of using games in that way?
I think we've talked pretty much at length about the pros.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's just a pro in anything that you can find community in, like, and you can find connection to. It's just that idea that, like, man, life sucks a lot of times, and what if you can find happiness in something and like find a connection with something, like, more power to you, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll joke, anyone who spends their weekends just fishing all the time, like, how can you go out and just sit on a lake? And they'll joke me right back for, like, how can you play 600 hours of Overwatch?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Just as a, I think it's also a really powerful, especially with games like WoW and Second Life that are very much a role-playing experience. When you're role-playing with actual people, even though it's mediated by the internet, it can be an extremely powerful tool for self-discovery and for just communication and overcoming fears and anxieties. And I took a class for my undergraduate degree that was all about it was about online culture, but studying it from an anthropological perspective. And we read this book about all these accounts from people who have who lived through Second Life, men who played as women and found out, just kind of discovered through that their transgender identity. And so I do think there are extremely powerful tools for identity building and identity discovery, or construction maybe. And I think a lot of people like get creeped out if you're like an older dude playing as like a little girl, or if it's kind of, people get unnerved by fluidity in general. But I do think that's one of the most surprising things to me about these games. At least persistent MMOs of that kind that do involve role playing. Overwatch is different, just a kind of a different game in general, but they are super powerful tools for kind of discovering things about yourself, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think as far as cons go, like, you know, we can get into all kinds of stuff about disconnecting from reality and all that sort of stuff, and I'm sure that's where either one of you may want to go. But for me, it's like you're tying so much of who you are to this thing that's ultimately going to end. Like, I think about, you know, the narrative around Overwatch right now. It's like, this game is dying, and it's mostly people just being melodramatic and not liking goats.
I mean, that's been the narrative since the game launched. So.
Yeah. Coming from the guy who played the beta and was like, it's a cool game, I just don't know if it's got the legs. My hot takes are terrible, by the way, if this is your first time listening to the show.
That's what makes them hot.
But there is a part of me that's like, man, I really love the Overwatch League, but it's not like the NBA, you know? Like, you can love the NBA and you know pretty certainly it's going to still be here in like 30 years because it's been here forever. Whereas, like, you can invest so much in these communities, and then it's like, well, I guess the Master Chief Collection is still a thing, and like there's still community to be found there, but like Halo 3, you know, was this major thing, and now Halo's not as major a thing anymore. Like, it still has this really invested community in it, but it's not this like massive like point in gaming culture anymore. Like, and maybe the new one's gonna change that or whatever. But like, Halo 3 was this almost, and maybe it's just because I connect with it so personally. Like, Halo 3 was kind of the thing that showed me that you can maintain relationships in this space. Like, you can have relationships in this space, and to look back on it now, and I look back on Halo with nostalgia, and it's because I don't presently feel that connection with it anymore. It's something that's passed. And so I think that it's that games are kind of transient, and they're here today, gone tomorrow. And if you tie your identity too tightly to one of them, you're fully dependent on whether or not a publisher keeps it up, right? Like, and
Yeah.
keeps the content going.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention. If Blizzard just all of a sudden decide to turn off its servers for WoW tomorrow, those guilds are gone. I mean, I do think we underestimate how powerful those ties are, because I do think they persist outside the game if they're strong enough and have been maintained long enough. But yeah, games are entirely dependent on a developer or a publisher continuing to support the game and continuing to support the servers, like investing in enough to keep them up. I also think like the standard stuff that comes with communicating online, like anonymity, can be extremely dangerous. And so just as easily as you can find a great person and establish a relationship online, toxicity can creep in. Terrible people like in the real world can exist in your third place, and sort of ruin it for you, but hide behind the guise of a mask, which is, I mean, that's been a thing since the internet was, when the series of tubes first started linking up.
Yeah. the two big cons for me, one is the disconnecting from reality, but that one is a very personal one for me because so as a teenager, I was the most awkward middle schooler imaginable. I wasn't very good at very many things in real life, but I was really good at games. And when life was hard, games were a place I could escape to. And when I went off to college, it was still like something I would do to like. It's fun to play games to blow off steam, but you can take that to excess. And I wound up on academic probation one semester primarily because I was just playing video games with people all the time. Not just games. Anytime anyone wanted to do anything fun in dorms, I was like, yes, let's do it. And I'll pull you, and you into it as well. We can all fail together. But games were the big one. And I had to eventually come to this realization that I was really good at doing things that didn't actually matter in worlds that didn't actually exist. And it was detracting from my ability to actually accomplish things of real value in the real world. And I think you got to find that balance because you can spend entirely too much time in these fake worlds and squander your potential to do something of value that could actually last, that could actually make a difference. So that's the one con to using a games as a third place, I think. And then the other con is I still don't think that online through a screen interaction can replace face-to-face interaction. I think it can be a good thing in your life. I think it's better than no interaction, but I still don't think it quite makes up for being with a real person. And I think that's an increasing threat among millennials. The millennials are less capable of face-to-face socializing than previous generations. I'm not aware of any research on the next generation, Gen Z or whatever. So I don't know if that trend is continuing, but I'd be shocked if it's not. And at the end of the day, I think that we do need those face-to-face interactions as well to be happy. And I think these relationships in third places can add to that, but I don't think they can totally replace that.
Mm-hmm.
All
That
right.
one.
So we're running long tonight, so I'll just go ahead and wrap my topic up. I want to read a little bit from the end of this Kotaku article. Let's see. She begins discussing the changes that have come to the game over the years and ends by saying, "This, in theory, is good. Overwatch stays interesting when it changes, as does the community. It's good for investors. It's good for new players. It's good for esports. Lately, I've learned that there's a balancing act that must take place between newness and oldness. If games are to be both places and continuously appealing commodities, there will always be the risk that, at some point, they will become too molten to call home." And that really resonated with me. And that's not really any different from real life third places. There was a little bakery here in town that served really good coffee, and eventually they stopped serving really good coffee, but they still served good espresso. And eventually they shut that down to become a pub. And at the end of the day, that's going to be better for their business with where they're at. And they excitedly invited me to be a part of that. I established a relationship with staff there. But I'm a nearly 30-year-old guy with a couple of kids, and a pub is not as appealing to a dude whose free time is on the way between dropping the kids off at daycare and heading into work. So
You don't want to grab a beer at 9 a.m.
Grab one for the kids. Get them in early.
So that's no longer my third place. And games are going to do that as well. And I was thinking about this the whole time you were talking about if you invest too much into one place, eventually you might wake up one day and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But Cody has also got a valid point. You may establish relationships that transcend that and last beyond it as well.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll go with you to your new third place.
Yeah. It's about defining that through the relationships and not through the medium itself,
Mm-hmm.
like allowing those things to move beyond it. So, all right, guys, great talk. Let's move on.
All right.
To our game. Kind of a weird transition here. We came out of this real serious topic, and now we're going to go play this game. But this is Two Truths and a Lie Gaming Edition. All right. So the way this works, I've got 3 facts here about a random game that you guys may or may not have heard of. 2 of these 3 statements are true. 1 is false. You must tell me which one is false. Here's the score. I'm up 1-0 because you guys did not guess the correct answer last week. All right. You ready for this week's game?
As
it.
ready as I can be.
Chocobo Racing. You guys familiar?
Oh, Chocobo?
Chocobo, sorry. Chocobo
Final
Racing.
Fantasy.
Yeah. All right.
I've heard of it. I've never played it.
All right. So this is Chocobo Racing is is that how you say it? Chocobo?
Chocobo.
Chocobo. All right. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy. I play Overwatch. Is this an Overwatch character?
Maybe it will be.
Chocobo. All right. No one laughed that time, so I got it right.
No, you're good.
Chocobo. I'm just kidding. Chocobo Racing is a kart racing game for the PlayStation developed by Squareco and released in 1999. All right, here are your 2 truths and a lie. The game's entire soundtrack is made up of remix songs from previous Final Fantasy games. In a secret stage unlocked after placing first on every available track, allowed the player to race on the Suzaka, a famous Japanese raceway. The game was scheduled for a sequel on Nintendo 3DS years later, but was mysteriously canceled and its existence swept under the rug. So, 2 of those are true. 1 is a lie. Cody, we're going to start with you this week. Which one is the lie?
Run me down these again.
The game's entire soundtrack is made up of remix songs from previous Final Fantasy games. In a secret stage that unlocks after placing first on every available track, the players are allowed to race on the Suzaka, a famous Japanese raceway. And the game was scheduled for a sequel on Nintendo 3DS years later, but was mysteriously canceled and its existence swept under the rug.
I'll go for the third one.
All right. Larry.
It's not going to be interesting this week because
Oh, his mic cut out. What did you say?
I think he's going for the third one too.
All right.
Yeah, he is.
And it looks like I will be going up 2-0.
Was it number 2?
Yeah, you can't. It's. I think it's the Suzuki or Suzuki Raceway. Suzuki.
That sounds like something Square would do. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's a real racetrack. I was like, how cool would it be if you had this really like? So this game was designed to compete with like, Mario Kart, Sonic Racer, Crash Team Race, like all those kart racers at the time. So it's super cartoony, but I was like, man, it'd be awesome if at the end of the game they were like, we're going to put in this real life track. I'm so good at this game. All right. We all knew that the first one was right.
Yeah,
after we knew that the Chocobas were from Final Fantasy. So, Salty as Chuck says, Mario Kart was already there. It doesn't make sense. Oh, the racing was on 3D. Mario Kart Racing was on 3DS. That's why they didn't release it. So, who knows? They probably were like, wait a minute. We got a 4.4 from IGN for the original. Why are we making a sequel? All right, guys. Who are you? Where can we find you? And what are you going to be tweeting about this week? Oh, Larry, let's start with you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm Larry. You can find me on... I'll be tweeting about the conspiracies.
For the audio listeners, he just turned off his light. And he's looking very crazed as his screen dims. All right, Cody.
I'm not turning it back on.
I'm Cody. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. I'm probably not going to be tweeting that much this week, but I'm going to be
tweeting much ever.
I'm busy, man, at work.
Oh,
Only
I'm
time I ever
busy. I
tweet-
got a job. I'm the one person on the planet who has a job.
Fuck you.
Nobody who tweets has a job.
I do tweet. It's just on my company's Twitter account.
From what I see on Twitter, it's exclusively journalists.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Look, man, your presence online has to go beyond your outlet, all right? That's where your value lies.
Thanks, Dad.
Hey, man. Just saying.
Your
No, I've been
value
meaning-
lies in your
I've been
presence.
meaning to tweet more. I do want to tweet a bunch about Kingdom Hearts 3 because I have some thoughts about that game.
I still
though
think
I'm-
it might get delayed.
I love that he's kept the lights off. I'm not going to play that game, but I have thoughts about it.
Let me tell you about this conspiracy. Kingdom Hearts 3, big delay coming.
I've seen pictures with people in their hands. I'm still not convinced it's coming out. Salty as Chuck says, I'm Salty as Chuck. You can find me at Salty as Chuck on Twitch. I think he means Twitter.
He says
oh,
on
no.
Twitch.
No, he means on Twitch.
Oh, does he? Okay. He says, I don't
maybe
really
not.
tweet, but when I do, it's replies to Luke Croft. So,
Okay, it is Twitter. It is Twitter.
and I am Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at Hoagie_OW. Guys, literally, Overwatch is not just my third place. It's also my second and first. All right. I am married to Tracer.
That's awkward.
Yeah. All right. This is PvA Radio. Don't tell my wife. This is PvA Radio. You can find us over on twitch.tv/PvA Radio live every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also listen to us on podcast services everywhere. Just search PvA Radio. Leave us a review. And then we're also on YouTube. Just search PvA Radio. Those episodes go up on Tuesday mornings. Larry's smiling, and I keep thinking, have I been saying Player 3 podcast this whole time? Or is it just because he's playing in the dark?
Oh, no. When you said you're married to Tracer, Salty as Chuck said, that's why she learned the rewind time. Boom.
Got him! This is PvA Radio, your collaborative audio feature article, your Catholic Cody. What do we ask them to do? Get them tattooed on their bodies. All right. Until next
Audio
week.
cut out, I'm sorry.
Until next
What an
week.
awkward ending.
We love you guys. Goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to the PvA Radio After Party Lounge where butt bucks are a currency.